All right. Welcome everyone to Helicon West. My name is Woodrow. I am an author, current student, and the intern here at Helicon.
Hey, Woody.
Wonderful to have you all. Helicon West is an uncensored public reading series. We host published authors and community writers to showcase all levels of skill and craft. We welcome open mic readers. We welcome donations to keep Helicon West going. We have some QR codes in the back for that. Those will be right next to our sign-up sheet for the open mic. Please help yourself to some Ibis decaf coffee while you're signing up or donating. That is right next to those things. And please be sure, if you do so, to use a lid to avoid spilling on our wonderful carpets. Helicon West humbly acknowledges that we are here on the territory of the northwestern band of the Shoshone Nation. We are grateful for our sponsors and partners, Sugar House Review, the Logan Library, the USU English Department, Cafe Ibis, and many community volunteers. For information, interviews, and more, please visit heliconwest.wordpress.com. And come fall, you should see a huge uptick in activity on that sector. A special request, please do keep the doors closed during the event, so if you do need to go out, just go ahead and slam it shut. It's going to squeak on you. Don't worry about that. All right. Our featured reader this evening has taught at Kansas State University, Utah State University, where he founded and edited Isotope, a journal of literary nature and science writing, and at the University of Arizona, where before retiring, he taught creative writing, the history of science fiction, and science communication. He has won fellowships and awards for multiple establishments, including the Whiting Foundation, the National Science Foundation, and the Rachel Carson Center in Munich, as well as the John Burroughs Prize for Best Natural History Essay, the Sigurd Olson Nature Writing Award, the Glasgow Prize for an Emerging Writer, the UCLA Institute of Environment and Sustainability Journalism Fellowship, and the New American Press Poetry Prize. His new book, Still is Bright, An Illuminating History of the Moon from Antiquity to Tomorrow, on sale over there, came out in 2024 from the amazing team at Pegasus Books. It has garnered praise from Booklist, Kirkus Reviews, Sky and Telescope, and the Toronto Globe and Mail, which named it one of their best 100 books of 2024. It was also listed as one of the best written nonfiction books by The Arist. When not at the keyboard, these days he can often be found hiking the surface of the moon through his eyepiece of his 10-inch telescope for his ongoing book project about the hunk of rock that circles this place we call home. Please welcome Christopher Cokinos.
And I brought the telescope, so I was just talking with Woody about the plan, so I'll speak for about a half hour. We'll have the break, and if you're interested, I have a handful of copies. And then after the open mic, if people are still vibrant and want to look at the moon, look at the moon. And we'll see. It looks like the forecast was showing clearing skies. So how many people have looked at the moon through a telescope? Okay. How many of you have done it recently? Okay. All right. How many of you done it with an expert on the moon? Yeah. I can tell once we, yeah, it's. I love showing the moon to people, even if you've seen it. It's a beautiful presence. So thank you, Woody. Thanks to the library. And can you hear me? Okay. Everything good? Okay. Thank you, Star, for leading the charge with Helicon West all these years and being such a light for us in the Valley. Friends and new friends here, thank you for spending some time with me, and thank you to the library and to Joseph for all of his help.
And to the English department, I don't know, did we say that already?
Yeah, but about half the English department is also here. Not surprisingly, right? So I think what I want to do, I sometimes show slides, and then I thought I can get a little wrapped up with those. I read a little bit, I show you pictures of the moon, historical maps, figures, and so forth, and I think I'm going to forego that tonight. And so just to give you a little bit of a preview so you know where we are at any given point, I'm going to read a little bit from the prologue, the first few pages, And then either another little portion of the prologue, or I'll just talk a little bit about the book and how it came to be and what I think it's about, because it's not just about the moon, it's about a number of things. And then I have a couple of other sections from later in the book that I might read. And if you have questions, maybe I'll try to reserve a little bit of time, and we can also talk, during break. So you can ask me questions like, is there a dark side of the moon? Is there a dark side of the moon?
Yes.
No.
Right? No?
No, there is not. There is not. Okay, so you'll get one good thing out of my presentation. On that. So this is where I wish I could do a YouTube video just instantaneously. But the way to explain it is, imagine the moon orbiting the Earth and turning at the same rate. So it's always the same face is always facing us. But on the moon, either the far side or the near side, there's sunlight, there's darkness, and the lunar day lasts 2 weeks, the lunar night lasts 2 weeks, so that's about a month, right? So there's your science fact for the day. All right. Move this out of the way a little bit. Okay, still good on sound? Good. Okay, all right, excellent. So this is the opening of the book. Each month when the moon returns at dusk, lit and waxing, the first C I routinely observe is Mare Crisium, the Sea of Crises, and the first lake I'd look for is the foreshortened Lacus Temporis, the Lake of Time. That seems just so. Mare Crisium is a huge plain of solid lava close to the near side's eastern limb. It looks elliptical. You can see it with your own eyes. And in the telescope, Crisium is ringed by headlands, dotted with craters, and rippled with low ridges like cast-aside fawns. Lacus Temporis, despite its weighty name, is a banal patch of gray rock, though shaped appropriately, a bit like an hourglass. The moon is always there, at least in our lives, lit or dark, seen or not, a frigid or scalding globe of pits and rubble, of peaks and scars, our helpful companion in gravity and evolution, a symbol, a surface, a nightlight during today's long lunar morning, and a silent siren for nocturnal predators, for mythic werewolves, lovers, geologists, and soon again, the astronauts. For me, until recently, as for other stargazers, the moon was a bane that bleached out fainter gray-green galaxies and nebula that one might otherwise see in the eyepieces of backyard telescopes or on the computer screens of professional observatories. Not long ago, I found myself questioning, if not everything, then quite a bit. Mortality, happiness, profession. I'd run my hand along the spines of philosophy titles in a used bookstore in Tucson, Arizona, tip one out, and purchase it to read at home in a certain silence. I'd lie down to meditate, trying to focus on breath instead of mistakes. I'd talk with my wife, Kathy, in a wide, gravelly yard behind our old adobe house beneath mesquites or the giant tamarisk. I'd fallen for that tree the first time we saw this place, a 19th century ruin that Kathy would go on to restore, and that would be our home for just 2 short years of our longer sojourn in Tucson. Too tired, too low, I couldn't bring myself to haul the telescope south of the city where the skies darken and the Andromeda galaxy blossoms enough to be seen with the naked eye. Ever since moving to the desert from 4 riverside acres in semi-rural northern Utah, I'd spent far less time under night skies than I used to. One of several touchstones I'd slowly lost in those clotted, frantic city years. I'd forgotten what mattered most, what Lord Byron called the heart still as loving. One night, as Kathy and I sat beside a fire stoked in a battered wood stove, which was once the house's only source of heat and which we had since moved outside, there it was. Bright, unhurried, sliced by light and shadow, the moon. I had never paid it much attention. Despite a childhood smitten with Apollo flights, years when I would tape record television reports of the last missions and those of Skylab and the Apollo-Soyuz rendezvous. I replayed the news anchors' voices, Walter Cronkite, Jules Bergman, on a cassette player at night in a dark bedroom in our trailer outside of Indianapolis. I was dreamy with imagined escape. Before then, I had sometimes used a 3-inch Edmund Scientific reflector, that's the brand name, by the way, Edmund Scientific reflector, my father had given me, and with it, I would dash across the lunar landscape. And dash was right, because the telescope was rickety and hard to use. I caught the moon in snatches. Too embarrassed to ask for help, I didn't say a word to my father, especially after he left my mother, sister, and me. Somewhere and sometime, the telescope also disappeared. That night in our Tucson backyard, I looked at the moon with my own eyes, and touched by the shadows of delicate mesquite leaves that it cast, I felt something clear, something inevitable, something sweet without striving. Not a child's silver spacesuit fantasy, not an adult's grasping for achievement and flattery, but a sober calm and more a grounded curiosity. I could go there, I thought. I could watch and learn. It felt like an epiphany, seeing that moon waxing past its half-moon phase, brimming with potential, shining peacefully above the ordinary darkness. By then, I had learned that in a few weeks it would be the 50th anniversary of a forgotten, once heralded photograph of the lunar crater named for Copernicus. The photo had been snapped by an orbiting probe sent to map the dangerous surface for safe landing sites before the astronauts descended. I was intrigued. I've always been interested in forgotten anniversaries. They tie me to history's chancy sweep, and they're a form of memento mori. They humble me and somehow make me feel loved. I decided to find that photograph, to learn why it had garnered so much attention. And this small adventure in discovering something lost would be, like the moonlit night with Kathy, the beginning of my backyard journey to the moon and its many histories. It would make my skin tingle. For the first time in a very long time, I would be part of something bigger than myself, and every month it would light my way. So that's the opening to the book. And if you look up online Copernicus picture of the century, you will find that photograph. And what it is an oblique view, the first oblique view of another world. And it was on the front page of the New York Times, you know, newspapers around the world, the Washington Post, the LA Times. It was called the picture of a century for a reason. It was really the first truly spectacular image returned from space. And so I learned that story, and I started looking at the moon with this telescope I had had for a long time. And the journey over about 6 years, it takes me a long time to write a book, but I've taken it from 10 to like 8 to like 6, so by the time I'm 90, I'll be knocking him out in like a couple of days. So it was a long process, but it was a lovely process to sort of fall in love with this object that we're familiar with, but not, you know. And so what I learned about the moon, I learned a lot about the moon, and I still love it. People occasionally say, you know, you still look at the moon? I say as often as I can, yes. It's an archive of timekeeping. The moon was really one of it was the first bridge between the daily cycle, right, and the year, the seasonal cycle. And so there's evidence that Cro-Magnon inhabitants of a cave in what is now France were notching phases of the moon on bone. And some people have argued that they were doing science, right? They're observing the natural world and they're marking passage. And there's an argument to be made, impossible to prove, but that sense of timekeeping, that complexity of marking the phases of the moon, this strange light in the sky, not knowing what it is, but seeing how it moves, was really one of the sparks for human self-awareness, for self-consciousness. So I talk about those things. I talk about the moon's role in folklore and religion. It's still vitally important to the Islamic calendar. It's still part of the Judeo-Christian calendar. There are many people who still think of the moon as a sacred presence. There's a tremendous controversy about landing. There are companies that want to land human cremains, human ashes on the lunar surface, and this is seen at best as disrespectful by the Dene, by the Navajo Nation. And so I talk a lot in this book about the sort of cultural resonance of the moon, at least to the extent that I can. I mean, it is so rich, it is so powerful, the moon's association with water, with fecundity, with childbirth, all of these things. It's cross-cultural. And it's a place, right? It's an actual material place. And so one of the things I found when I started looking at the moon through the telescope, and this is probably why I had avoided it. I mean, it's really easy to find in the telescope. Like, it's there. It's not hard to find. And then when you look at it, there are a lot of holes on the surface of the moon, and it's very confusing. So Kathy would joke that I was getting like my Boy Scout badge in lunar observing. I found this program online. This was early on, as I sort of became fascinated by these things. And it just laid out what to look for, when you could find it, what these geologic features were, what they signified. And it was, in a sense, like, being led by a good naturalist up at Tony Grove, talking about the rock strata, the different flowers and so forth. So I earned this diploma from the American Lunar Society. I might be previewing a part of what I'm going to read, but anyway, so I did the program. I'm taking copious notes, okay, what I'm doing, what I'm looking at, and just trying to generate language, because I'm going to write about this, right? And I'm doing this in Tucson, and after we had left our 4 acres at the other end of the valley, I wept the day we left. We bought a cabin up in Logan Canyon. So this also becomes a meditation on place here on Earth, and sort of encountering places on their own terms and not sort of overgirding your own emotional expectations on them. So I kind of failed in that respect in Tucson. And so I'm looking at the moon, I'm finding these objects, I send in my notes to this guy named Eric, and it turns out the American Lunar Society was like defunct. It had been defunct for a long time. So it was just this guy's email, and he's like, hi, thank you for the notes. And he was really sweet, and he's like, I'll go ahead and, he like generates the diploma for me. So not long after the site came off the internet. And so anyway, I got my moon badge, my diploma, and then I went on to a more advanced program by the Royal Canadian Astronomical Society, and I did that one as well, and there are others. There are programs to observe every named feature on the near side of the moon. It's like 1,000 different features, okay? So maybe I'll do that, I don't know. So the book gets wrapped up in these various aspects of the moon's history, cultural, scientific. There's memoir, obviously, in this book as well, and I sort of joke, I'm a boy with this telescope. It's a bit of an adventure, but it takes me back to my childhood, as I indicated here. I tell a story of being, this was after I had a concussion here, before we moved to Tucson, and my therapist was advising me to go to stores when they weren't busy. So I could, sort of just be out and not be sort of panicky around people and so forth. And so I was up at the DI. This was some, February or March gray, we're waiting for this weather to come forward. And I'm wandering around DI in a sort of slightly vertiginous state, and there's my childhood telescope. Like, there is the exact telescope my father gave me when I was a kid. And I held on to the, the counter, and for some reason did not buy it that day, and went back and got it. And part of the story of the book, too, is as I go through this journey with the moon and its history, bringing us up to the present day, I restore this telescope at the same time my father is dying of cancer. So the book then moves forward in time. I think I'll read a little section here in a second about Werner von Braun. Dick Hatch and I were at a very interesting local collector's house today, and he had some material from Werner von Braun, who was the German rocket pioneer who was, I'd say he was happy to work for Hitler, but he was certainly willing to work for Hitler in order to build rockets that he eventually wanted to take humanity to the moon and Mars. Not that there are any such things as morally compromised rocket engineers, right? So that's another story in this book. I had certain childhood views of who he was, and then I learned that history much like when I was in my 30s. It's only then that I learned that von Braun had been a willing accomplice in war crimes and using concentration camp labor to build these rockets, on which then the U.S. built its supremacy in nuclear missiles and building the first rockets to take us to the moon, right? So this childhood thing I was in love with, watching these, astronauts unfold, their adventures on TV has this basis in the darkness of an underground factory in Nazi Germany. So I come to various aspects of science. Galileo looks at the telescope, or looks at the moon through a telescope for the first time. This is revolutionary. It really launches modern science. The moon becomes a place. I can't emphasize enough how incredibly important that was, because it had been seen strictly as a deity or some kind of like perfectly polished sphere that was just there, right? It's a world. If it's a world, God wouldn't waste a world. There has to be life on the moon. There's a lot of life on the moon, right? There are all these creatures. There's so much life on the moon. We're going to write newspaper hoaxes about them in 1835 and trick people into believing we have giant telescopes that can find, the flying Batman of the moon. And then we find, no, actually the moon's really, really sterile. It's really harsh, it's dead, and yet has this sublime beauty. More recently, what we've learned about the moon is really the reason why we're going back, we being the United States and our allies through the Artemis Accords and the Chinese effort as well, and that's because, although the moon, for a long time we wished there was water on the surface of the moon, and the dark spots that you can see with your naked eye, those are called the Maria, right? But they're not oceans, okay? They're plains of lava, and we've discovered in the past 30 years that there's water ice at the lunar South Pole and the lunar North Pole. So mixed in with the regolith, the lunar soil, there's water ice, and that is profoundly exciting for scientists, because those places are shadowed. They've been shadowed for billions of years. That water has been there for billions of years, and that is an archive of the early solar system. It will tell us about how we came to be. It will tell us about other solar systems as well. And it turns out you can use water to do things like drink. You can make oxygen and rocket fuel out of it. And so at the end of this book, I spend a fair amount of time talking about the sort of where we are now, right? This pitch forward to land robots, to land humans on the moon. What does that mean? There are all kinds of ethical issues here. Nobody owns the moon, okay? No national claim can be made on the moon. But what about a private entity? That's actually not part of international law. I won't bore you with this. It's actually not boring. I think it's really fascinating. Who owns the moon? And what do we do with those resources? So I come to the end of the book thinking about those things, and also going to see the moon through a really big telescope. So I went to Mount Wilson in California and looked through a 60-inch reflector, so 6 times the size of my telescope, and had this amazing experience. I don't know how many of you have been in a large observatory dome. Okay, I'm not a person of faith. I'm a secular person. Going into a large observatory dome is like going into a temple for me, and it is beautiful. So Mount Wilson was absolutely amazing experience. So that, just to give you a little bit of a sense of the book. So I think what I'll do is read 1 or 2 more sections. Have a sip of water. Any questions while I'm having a sip of water? Any factoids about the moon you want? I occasionally give a quiz and hand out stickers to the people who win, but I'm out of stickers. So, what's the gravity difference?
It's approximately
1/6. Yeah, 1/6. Yeah. So you can jump very high on the moon. And if you look at the moonwalkers, and if you're watching them, you can see some of the blooper reels where they're falling down and they're having trouble sort of figuring out. And they've discovered that the best way to walk on the moon is to kind of bunny hop. So, okay, let me read this section. So this is a trip to Florida. And this was the first time I went to Florida. I've been there twice now, and weirdly hadn't gone, even though I was fascinated with space flight. And so what I wanted to do was see a rocket launch, which I do see. And at the same time, I wanted to try to confront this, the ethical morass of the origins of our space program, okay, which are, as I said, rooted in the Nazi effort to build the V-2 rocket, which killed about 5,000 to 6,000 people in places like Antwerp and London, and killed about 12,000 slave laborers who were building these rockets. And at one point, von Braun, who affected a distance from this, especially after the war, when he and his German engineers were brought over by the United States. They were, basically, top targets by the United States to bring them over to compete with the Soviets. He calculated the number of slaves needed to make the process of building these rockets more efficient. So that, by definition, was a war crime. Okay. I've come one February with this uncertain cargo to see Florida's Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center, where, despite years of fascination with all things space, I have never traveled, where launch gantries, lightning towers, and assembly hangars form a sparse and cryptic skyline across the grass and water prairie, jutting glyphs that, while made legible by knowledge and distance, have constructed no prophecy our planet has embraced. The tropical sky is as hazy with salt and vapor as the gantries and hangars are hard-edged with machined precision, their logic wavering in a dream. The Space Coast's road fill providing ditches, its overlit discount stores, and mid-century resorts whose battered facades have been redressed with corporate logos, and the strip clubs and the Jesus-themed coffee shops, the abandoned boat storage sheds and grubby lawns, the gravel pull-ups for pickups spilling anglers, and cotton candy ground into the soles of work boots and flip-flops made in China, all sprawl around me in some temperate and tacky elaboration that it almost seems a practical joke or a piece of performance art. This is the place where we start going to the stars. When I arrived, I'm kind of hard on Florida, sorry. When I arrived at Cocoa Beach, passing parking lots hacked out of Florida's Max Ernst jungle, after roadside osprey and strip mall egrets, after chunky boars rooting about the drainage ponds rippled with vestigial alligators, after miles of stumpy palms and NASA's Titanic vehicle assembly building's giant building at the Cape, looming like a protocol. Beyond the cruise ships docked at Port Canaveral, my room at the Sierra Motel smelled of sticky bleach and salt, like the cheap rooms of beach vacations on which my mother would take me and my sister. Decades ago in Cocoa Beach, at George's Steakhouse, diners were directed to restrooms labeled astronettes and astronauts. There was the unironically named Celestial Trailer Court and the Astrodyne Outer Space Eden, as well as motels named Sea Missile, Vanguard, and Polaris. The Moon Hut restaurant is closed, and the Satellite Motel with its giant globe sign spiky with 2 faux satellites is gone. The Mistletown Shopping Center survives as a vision yet to be built in a vintage photograph with its billboard advertising, "It is coming soon." That retro space age is all gone. Lightheaded with anticipation, I'm on a pilgrimage to time, mine, the space ages, and I walk along the edge of a future, new space, the promised democratization of access to orbit and beyond made of all people by billionaires, and the global revival of lunar exploration, the missions that should return humans to the moon in my lifetime. I'm on a free return trajectory, an odyssey come full circle. From my fondness for musty Funkin' Wagnall's yearbooks, in which silver-suited pilots rode rockets shedding ice in blurry photos, heroism as aesthetics, not as motivation, to the 50-something son whose chemist father is dead, whose childhood telescope sits by a desk, whose moon is manifold, made of facts and fancies, and lately a recognition of mortality. I am almost weightless with zones of time, including this week's near future, the dark beach from which I should witness a rocket launching a probe to study the sun's gales of light. I have come to see that, to see a rocket fly, to erase the disappointment of a previous attempt in California. In the days ahead, I will stand before an ancient console of control room dials and toggle switches at a disused launch facility and see a knob actually labeled Decade Selector. I'll move the Decade Selector back and forth. I always have. This was the dream, sea to land to sky, hatched like a schematic egg in room 8 of Cocoa Beach's Sea Air Motel. 4 tall, salt-crusted windows, 2 facing east to the ocean, the golden brown umber wooden panels, a comfort to Werner von Braun, who stayed here in this very room on his trips from the development facility in Huntsville, Alabama, where he worked, to supervise work at the Cape. Werner von Braun traveled with his pillow, like I do, and his secretary would have to call someone to fetch it after the absent-minded engineer invariably left it behind. All those bright, amoral dawns, hot coffee, the distance from World War II's V-2 test at Peenemünde, where the oxygen plant was built to the proportions of a basilica. From that gray Baltic to Florida's green seas, from leering Hitler's V-2s to the Cold War rockets named Redstone and Titan, and soon then von Braun's moon-bound Saturns, the orogeny of the Rocketeer's time-drenched passion to cast our species into space, toward immortality, a dream that requisitioned pain and delivered it. I am in his favorite room. Tonight, I eat takeaway spaghetti at the white table, then walk a few paces to the empty beach, where the Atlantic is a churning planet of molten agate, and the moon tosses its light like a reminder. Thank you. I tried to time this to save 3 or 4 minutes if anybody has any questions. There's not as much moon in this as there might have been, but we can look later. But yeah, and you don't have to ask. How many people knew? Yes, please, yeah.
Would you go to the moon if you had the chance to? Like, is it together?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Would you?
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, no, of course I would love to. Not happening. I do have favorite places. I was looking at, there's a mountain range that you'll be able to see tonight if the clouds clear. I mean, these mountains are 18,000 feet high. Okay, they're huge. And Apollo 15 flew over those mountains to land. I write about the Apollo 15 expedition. I write about how the astronauts talked about the moon. And Apollo 15 was the first mission where those descriptions were really largely positive. The first men to go to the moon, Apollo 8 crew, was an amazing trip and achievement. Their initial impressions of the moon were actually pretty negative. And they called it dirty beach sand. Said it was essentially gray, reminded them of plaster of Paris. Frank Borman, who was from Tucson, and so part of what happens in the book is I'm kind of doing the Tucson what Frank Borman did to the moon. Borman says it's a vast expanse of nothing, and he does a beautiful, sort of unintentional, beautiful metaphor. He says, clouds and clouds of pumice stone, but before that he uses all these pejorative terms. And so even in the official transcript of the flight journal, there's someone has inserted this little bracketed commentary that says essentially, well, they weren't trained as geologists, so they were just trying to get to the moon and back, and it's not until later that the crews really see the moon in this way that sort of gives it the respect that it's due as this, and it's a strange barren place. But I have to imagine if I had been an adult listening to the Apollo 8, broadcasts of those descriptions, I feel, well, why are you there? What's the point? That mission is best known for the reading of Genesis on Christmas Eve. If you have, it's actually quite beautiful. Yeah, Jeff.
There's a lot of attention right now on Mars, and I'm just wondering, like, do you appreciate that attention because you really don't want people up there on the moon because they're gonna want to mess around with it, and you really want to keep it protected, or do you feel like we don't know anything about the moon? Why are we focused on Mars as well? Or
Yeah, there's a lot there. So what's happening right now, and it's in such flux that the people at the agency are not entirely sure what's happening. So we have this program called Artemis. It was started under the first the Trump administration, continued by President Biden and his administration, and now continues in the Trump regime. And the goal is to return Americans to the moon and international partners to the moon. The language that had been part of that mission to land the first woman and first person of color has been scrubbed, of course. It remains part of their policy, however. So we're not getting to Mars anytime soon. It's just impossible. And Elon Musk has been a visionary in a lot of ways. That's just sheer madness. Like, we're not getting to Mars probably within the lifetime of the youngest person here. Maybe, but it's not going to be an easy thing to do. We're talking about the difference between basically a 3-day mission to get to the moon and a 9-month mission to get to Mars, where you're exposed to enough radiation that you will get cancer. Okay, so it's really hard. My hope is that we return to the moon in this way that is international, cooperative, science forward, with an understanding that, yeah, if we want to use some of the gifts of the moon, as I would call them, rather than resources, to make rocket fuel, to go elsewhere, make hydrogen rocket fuel, yes, but it needs to be done in a way that understands that we don't want to scar another place, even if no one's there. Like, it's dead. Okay, it's dead. Does that help answer the question?
Well, that would be my fear, is we would go and ruin another.
There are a lot of people talking about making sure we don't do that, and a lot of lawyers, policymakers, and activists. So, and this is going to be hard too. Going to another world is hard. Yeah, Michael.
Kind of a riderly question. So with a topic that's so vast and historically so vast, and how do you decide when you've researched enough, when you've read enough, and how do you decide what you want to include and what you're not going to include?
Right.
And then last part of the question is what's your favorite part of your book? You look at it through so many lenses, and what's your favorite part?
And for those of you who are in classes or writing on your own, I think the sort of, in a sense, it's the kind of a stock answer, but it's true, which is, you sort of know when you're done writing, when you know you're done writing. Like, you just have this feeling, and I think that's true also with the research. You start to accumulate all this material, and you're like, I'm not writing a 700-page book. Like, I can't include all this, and I will bore people. I may be really interested in this, but I cannot, sustain that for other readers. So that was part of the decision. The folkloric material was kind of overwhelming, and so I made a deliberate attempt to, in that chapter, to have a narrative and hang on that narrative various sort of aspects of the global culture, and just basically tried to say, I'm gesturing toward all this. There's no way I can embrace it, and I have my particular standpoint as this middle-aged white guy in Utah. So I can only do so much. My favorite part of the book, I don't know, actually, Michael. I don't know what the favorite part. I thought you were going to ask me my favorite part of the moon, but it would be the Aristarchus Plateau and the Apennines. Let me think about that. Yeah, I may not have an answer.
Chris, there was an article in the New York Review of Books,
Yeah.
two new books on the moon. You've probably seen it.
I don't know that I have seen that. What was the gist?
Well, I don't know that I could come to gist, but there was a particular part of it I wanted to ask you about. Talk about a revolutionary cellular life with the moon, and the moon is used as a timekeeper.
Yeah.
And cellular life has to know how to keep time.
Yeah.
And I just never thought of that.
Yeah.
Cells having that kind of
That's
intelligence.
that sort of
if you
sensitivity.
like. Yeah. And that time is sort of embodied in this cellular world.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the bone with the crosshatching.
Yeah. Yeah.
They talk about that as probably, and that was like,
35,000 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
where people were keeping time and how it's
Yeah,
both
absolutely.
in terms of cultural evolution and biological.
And the biological, and yeah, and I really, thank you for that question. I neglected to talk about this. I'll just say briefly that we probably wouldn't be here without the moon for a number of reasons. One, so the moon was, do you know how the moon formed? Do a little science, you know. I like the English professor doing science. So the early Earth is hit by a Mars-sized planet called, they have retroactively called Theia, smashes into the Earth, blows, you know, both these worlds into this giant ball and disk and like torus of gas and dust and so forth. Out of that, the Earth and the moon form. It explains a lot of those strange facts about these two bodies. The moon is weirdly large and weirdly close. If you look at other moons in the solar system, that weirdly close aspect of it meant that the Earth was spinning very fast and it slowed down over time. The moon receded over time, and that initial collision tilted the Earth just a few degrees. That's why we have seasons. And so without seasons, it would be much harder for complex life to evolve. And the fact of the moon being nearby and lit in this way, alternating light and darkness, is implicated in all these biological mechanisms. And so I have a little bit in here about, you know, different animals that respond in this way. And also things like actually menstruation and the moon just are coincidentally the same length. There actually is no link according to the science. I don't know. Others, yeah. So yes, the moon is really, I think, you know, we probably would.
I always thought humans made up time, but so when that is embedded in it.
It is, yeah, there's an embodied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
just time.
speaking of time, I will end my time. Thank you so much for listening. And stick around. Open mic and telescope time. Thank you so much.
Give Chris another hand. So we're doing things a little bit different tonight in the interest of getting our telescope set up and getting everything, you know, ready to go as soon as Helicon West is over. So we're going to have a really quick little session where we either purchase books or get them signed or whatever, and then we'll start the open mic right after that. Righty. If everyone will find a seat, we will get started with the open mic portion of the event. All right, so traditionally we'll announce 3 readers at a time. We'll have them all read, and then I'll come back up and announce the next 3. So our first 3 readers tonight are to be Star Colebrook, Yash Rivera, and Ronald Jensen.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chris. Wow, I really enjoyed you talking about the book. I hope I get to hear you talk about it more over the years as you're writing your next book. This piece is one of the prose poem memoirs that I've been writing since June 2021 with Sean's Front Room. And I've started revising them with Jack Rennick in Seattle, who holds a Zoom group. And it's really been a delight to get into a new kind of poetry. So this one is called To Find. No blood work tech ever complains about finding a vein on me. The veins in my hands and the veins on my wrists and the veins in the crook of my elbows stand high and ropey under the surface of my skin, veins thick and purple blue. But try poking a needle in, they roll away like ball bearings. It's the same with my emotions. They seem transparent, my face a register of every passing thought, but delve down and they dodge. They roll away before anyone can bleed them. The first time my husband hit me, we had been married for 9 months. He was drunk. He came home from work, too drunk to know what he was doing. I was in the bedroom, our 3-month-old baby boy in his crib. Something I said set my husband off. He swung on me. I dodged him, but his fist grazed the side of my head. He passed out on the bed. It was the last straw, or so I thought at the time. I took the baby and all the baby things. I took as many clothes and personal items as I could. I ran to the car and drove to Idaho. I didn't think I could leave him, but I did. As I drove from my little rented house in Logan, Utah, to my mother's place in Idaho, I pulled off the road to scream and wail over my plight, and I made up a story to tell my mother about deciding on the spur of the moment to bring the baby for a visit. My mother told me when I got married a week after my 17th birthday that I had made my bed and there would be no coming back home. When I got to Mother's, I was wearing a cheerful smile. Feigning excitement, I hugged her and told her my story. I said, "We can go to lunch tomorrow on your break from work." I cried all night, muffling my sobs in the pillow. In the morning, we made breakfast and bathed the baby. I told her I'd come to town and meet her on her lunch hour. After more crying and feeling hopeless about my marriage and about my life, I reapplied my makeup, put on my pink mini dress with white eyelet trim, strapped on my platform sandals, and drove with the baby to M.H. King's variety store in Preston, where my mother worked. I carried the baby, a sweet little blonde boy, in his gold corduroy jumper into the store. In small-town Idaho, I was out of place. I'd left town as a rebellious farm girl, and here I was, dressed to the teeth and packing baby. My face was a bright, cheery mask, oblivious to staring eyes, rude whispers. I was grieving. I was afraid. I had nowhere to go. I needed to find a job, a place to live. I had no idea what to do about baby care if I did find work. My outer attitude? Fine. No one getting into my fear. No one taking a measurement of my emotions. No bloodletting here. I was holding everything together. I was here to have lunch with my mother. My marriage was over. I would find a way. And then my husband walked in.
I was going to read a poem, but hearing Star read that piece reminded me of other things I've written in that group. So, the prompt for this was we had to write about a time when we have been wrong. So, when I was 6 years old, my mother told me that Chinese people couldn't see red hair. Looking back on it, I'm sure she must have told me they didn't see many redheads in China, but I never clarified what she meant, and neither did she. I am embarrassed to admit the years I believed what slowly became obvious. How many years of interactions with strangers, hovering several feet above me with their cameras, stuttering Mandarin, asking to take a photo with me, before I would piece together the truth of her statement. I felt like a movie star posing with every third stranger on Great Wall trips. On the other hand, I was like a ghost, something that could only be caught on camera. I was a kind of urban legend to these people, like Bigfoot or something. I must be for them to pay 5 kwai to take a photo with me. I imagined how I must look to their almond eyes, a small pale child with a fuzzy, bald, egg-shaped head, only to have my red curls captured in the snap of a camera. I can't tell you exactly when I realized the idiocy of this racial stereotype I had created in my head, but once I did, I wanted to take it to my grave. I'm going to actually skip that part. But I remember at 12 years old wondering if every piece of garbage I found in a parking lot could be a condom. The same way I'd spent elementary school, wondering if every kid my age thought these same disgusting thoughts I was too afraid to say out loud. My condom confusion did not last as long as my misconception about Chinese people and red hair.
I don't remember when I figured that one out either, but soon enough for 13-year-old me to have his most brilliant plan. Stuff a condom with flour and have the most perfect packer. I remember awkwardly shoveling flour into the bright blue oily latex as I quickly struggled to get floured by dragging it through the container. My mother would never be the wiser that latex and lube had been soaking in the flour bin. I remember awkwardly struggling to tie the now floury condom and rinsing the flour off the outside in my bathroom sink, then quietly shoving the flour container back into the kitchen. I remember awkwardly stuffing it in my leggings and struggling during classes as condom of flour attempted to slip down my pant leg. What had been my most brilliant plan turned into what was probably my worst. I was dumb enough to repeat this little trick in my 20s, thinking my prior mistake was not adding a second condom. And I will end that there.
Hi,
Hi, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
this point we just got to senior trip. I can't believe it's been 44 years since we went, and the trip that was fun. It was a rough trail for senior class. We're happy to go before the year would pass. We went to Las Vegas and California too. There are many fun things for us to do. But I was things for them to have. But like to remember, the dog was a wow. Some work on letter to mom. Mom, I miss you. Since you forgot it. What was happening with me since you passed on. I met a woman. Her name's Terry. She's love of my life. You know what I mean. First we got married, then we got sealed, stamped on the side. She believes it's all real. So I look forward to when you can meet my wife. And we're all together in enough life.
Okay, our next three readers are Michael Halleck, Jan Uros, and Brooke Height.
Good evening, everyone. I have a couple poems to read. Go down my notes. Give me a little bit more time. The poems that I'm going to read tonight, first one is Stun, and the second one is called Measure of Man. Intended to read them last time, but the timing just didn't feel right. And the more I did read Stun and the Measure of Man, the more I felt that they were actually two of one, and they belong to be read together, so I'm going to read them both together. They weren't written not too long apart, but it's interesting that the more I read them, the more they seem to go together. They seem to reflect a feeling that I've currently been working with, experiencing maybe deeper than when I wrote them almost 30 years ago, sometime the end of 1985. It's like they were written somehow about the future, about this time now, with the understanding of knowing now what I didn't know then with regards to a lot of the studying that I've done over the past 10 years. There was a note that I wrote by hand at the bottom of Stun, and I wrote it to someone that says, as you can tell, it's been a ways from being completed, but I wanted to send you at least a glimpse of what I'm working on, which in turn may give you a glimpse of where I am. So the first piece, Stun, is a piece of work, actually, that was literally pieced together, a raw work in progress, even still. I'm still scribbling with putting it together. A somewhat unfinished piece that I've slightly edited, most of it typed using an old school mechanical typewriter consisting of 3 typed pages with paragraphs that have been cut out and taped together in its current order with whiteouts and notes and scribbled words inserted throughout. The current version displays a unique style and vision over the first handwritten spiral notebook version, which displayed a considerable effort via much scribbles and insertions in an attempt to express something deeply felt and or intuited. It is within these 2 poems, actually, that a theme of the whole fence line of poetry that I've written begins to emerge. The second piece is called Measure of a Man. In it is a word that was curious alluded to last time, the word theandrix, the meaning of which is related to or existing by the union of the divine and human natures, which infers a question to me, could theandrix refer to quite possibly the original archetypal nature of the human being, the daemon soul archetype, born of an earth-oriented mortal nature, and the other of a sky divine nature. It is this theme that seems to run and direct the fence posts that most of my writings seem to point to. The last thing before I read is with regards to the measure of a man. I was thinking about this as I was writing it, especially the word man. I'm referring mostly in a reflective way to myself in this poem, not a patriarchal tendency to exclude women or the feminine, the goddess. One could easily say the measure of a woman. Stunned. I stand in a mist of vapor that rises from the gulf to the cliff where I stand, gazing into a vortex. I see many things. As I stand above the valley of death, I will fear no evil. Though the fog may hide the details in its spiral, I can still see shadows and silhouettes of its destruction. Rising from the gulf below, the heavy vapor, with its sweet and seductive aroma, has no effect on me here. It dissipates and vanishes long before it reaches the edge of the cliff where I stand. Yet, even at this distance, I can see through its camouflage and watch the movement of the immense vortex. I see myself also in the reach of its spiral, but not as prey in its shadows or silhouettes of destruction. I am subject to it, yes, and at the same time not bondage to it. I am a traveler. Eyes staring into eyes, weeping shadows of the soul, echoing deterrence in consciousness, fatigue through intangibility, hearts at a medium of reflection. In the light of the day, hands are active in labor. Pride dies in work. Work bends to demand. Quality is lost in quantity. Distorted features on a lake. Twisted objects of reflection, elusive images of the archetype. Water is the medium of representation. In the dark of the night, hands are active in evil. Love dies in lust. Play bends to obsession. Dignity is lost in desire. Through eyes that are not my own, I see life as a turbulent labyrinth, filled with unending deterrents to keep one from reaching its center, understanding its meaning, and obtaining the redemption of its bondage. I see myself also in the midst of this maze of frustration, and yet I am not alone. I have within me a flame, an unexplainable link, joined to one who stands beyond this structure of entanglement, my Father. Reminiscing days gone by, a life of no regrets, yet trapped in transcendence, bombarded with circumstance, stunned by experience. Gone is the mystery, gone is the adventure. No longer are we enticed by the desire to explore, to search, to ask. Life becomes systematic robotics. The traveler continues on that journey, while a hope within the soul sustains, an eye is watching, a hand maintains. The breath within the creation groans, awaiting the redemption of its body. The man of callous, the man in spell, between creator and creation, the silence still remains. The man in stone, the man of God. This is the measure of a man. In the light of a dream lurks the shadow of despair. In the passion of possibilities dwells the skepticism of expedience. In the flame of God exists no unclean thing. In the measure of a man, a fire is raging. How does a man define the limits of one's existence? In the nature of theandrix. How does a man define the extent of one's passions? In the light of incarnation. How does a man define the gradual pain of death during the peace of regeneration? How does a man define the individual order of balance between what is and what isn't? What is the true measure of a man?
Hello. This piece is called Letter to My 5-Year-Old Self. Hey Jan, look at you all cute and innocent and unjaded. You have so much potential. Don't screw it up. Yes, it is true that you're not the favorite child out of 3, not even the second favorite. But you are scrappy. Maybe because you are not favored. Being the youngest, some people say that you are spoiled, but no, that's not the case in your family. If your older brother or sister do something bad, your parents come down harder on you. For instance, if your sister stayed out late and broke curfew, you would not be able to stay out as late. Or if your brother got caught playing in the canal on the way to school by falling in and arriving at school with wet pants, you were then forbidden to take that route to school. Anyway, at 5, you are smart, curious, athletic, happy-go-lucky, and funny. You sometimes will have the entire room laughing at one of your jokes. You will like the attention. But please develop all those other traits you will need. You will need them because starting from now on, you will move every year of your life for the next 13 years. Yes, that means 13 different schools where you will be the new kid. So you need to perfect your personality to be accepted in all those new schools. Develop your athleticism. You can already outrun everyone in your class. Don't be deterred just because you will move every year and miss spring tryouts for whatever sport you're interested in. Just do it. Nike should pay me for thinking of this first. And whatever you do, don't start smoking at age 15. When you eventually quit 8 years later, it'll be extremely hard to do. Learn to develop good relationships, how to make and keep friends. This will be a key component in your entire life. Also, learn how to accept rejection from parents, from friends, from bosses, from 2 future husbands. Your path will not be easy. Here are some hints. On New Year's Eve, 1973, the day after you turn 18, do not follow your friends into the girls' bathroom at the Army Base Country Club and sit down and pass a joint around the room. The MPs will bust in and catch you just as you're holding that joint. They will be extra excited that they busted a general's daughter who just turned 18 and is now considered an adult. You will be lucky to get off easy with the law, but not with your father. 2 months later, do not cut off your long golden hair. It will never grow long again, and will never be golden again without the use of chemicals. Please consider your boyfriend Dave's offer of marriage, even though it may have been offered half-assed. When your life is falling apart after your parents' divorce, and you are literally abandoned by both of them, and forced to make choices that do not align with your grand plan of life. After your parents' divorce, when you are eventually forced to go live with your mother, who is bitter and despondent, do not decide that you cannot live with her and therefore run away with the first man to offer an escape. Try to work on your relationship with her. She will be needed in your life later, and you should try to help her with her bitterness. Do not decide to not go to college right after high school. This will set you back for years, and you'll have to work extra hard to achieve a college degree later when you are a single mom working full-time at age 35. However, this will be a good thing to impress upon your children that it is important to finish your education in a timely manner when you are young. On Halloween 1974, do not go to a party and do not talk to a guy named Herb. Although he will provide you with 8 fairly good years of marriage and 2 beautiful daughters, there will be 5 years following of unbelievable heartache and financial woes. You will eventually pick up your life and start over with your daughters in a state many miles away
and try to survive as a single working mother, putting herself through school. But you will continually be playing catch-up compared to your contemporaries. Next to quitting smoking. This will be the most difficult period of your life to that date. Do decide to relocate to Logan, Utah to raise your 2 daughters after your divorce. It will be hard to fit into this close-knit Mormon community, but you will persevere and make many lifelong friends. It will prove to be a safe environment for you and the girls, and you will build a loving family unit with the 3 of you. And your mother will come to live nearby to assist with babysitting and support. Your relationship with her will finally be good again. One day in 1994, you will find a horseshoe as you're walking on some railroad tracks. You will make a wish. Please be more specific on your wish because it comes true. Being painfully single for 6 years, you merely wish for a romantic fling. That night, you meet a dashing postdoctoral student from Bari, Italy, who's in town for a 3-month professional visit. He's 8 years younger than your age of 38. He's drop-dead gorgeous. He will sweep you off your feet. It will be the most passionate, lustful, whirlwind love affair of your life, but will come crashing down in 3 months' time. But oh, what memories you will have the rest of your life of your Italian lover. Do not, under any circumstances, sell your quaint little bungalow house when you get married for the 2nd time. By doing so, you will provide the down payment on the big house that you and your new husband will move into, but then end up with the burden of that big house when he leaves, unexpectedly 17 years later. The bungalow would have been a perfect place for a single woman to live affordably. In fact, don't get married that 2nd time. Although this man is the nicest guy in the world, and you're extremely happy, and the children too, you will have a few good years, but he will prove to be one of the worst things that you will ever have to deal with by the time he leaves you, after having multiple affairs and depleting a lot of your life savings. The bitterness will last for years. Make sure that you adopt a sweet little dog named Timber that an acquaintance will send you an email posting about. You will rename her Ellie, and she will be the love of your life. She will live to be 14 and have a tumultuous time with health problems, but will be totally worth it. Do travel to Croatia in 2013 with a girlfriend, but do not waste your time and energy wishing you could share the experience with your then husband, as he will be plotting and planning how to get out of that marriage, and will be dallying with multiple internet dalliances. Just enjoy the trip and realize this is the best trip you've ever been on. Until May 2022, you will travel with that same girlfriend to England and Wales. You are able to just enjoy it, and it is the best trip you've ever been on.
Hi everyone. Can people hear me? Okay. I was really deliberating over what to read, so I'm going to read 2 things. This first one, I don't even know what it is, and I'll read a poem. And you'll have to forgive the roughness of this first one. I wrote it during a savvy writing workshop, and I really have a hard time editing those pieces because they're very raw to me, so bear with me. When I was in elementary school, that's when my mom first taught me about my Miranda rights. Brooklyn, she would tell me, if you're ever called down to the principal's office and they're saying you're in trouble, don't tell them anything. Ask to call me or Dad, and don't say anything until one of us is there. Even if you didn't do anything, just wait until we're there. I never understood why she was so intense about it until I grew up. She understood how easy it would be for me to be treated unfairly as a kid, and especially as a kid who had not only an implicit trust, but an implicit love for all authority figures. Moms make the best lawyers, people who aren't often described as heroes. But she's not everyone's hero, she's just mine, because I did get called down to the principal's office that same year. That walk to the office felt like an execution march. The desk had loomed so high over me, even when I was standing. When I sat, it looked like it might fall over on me. The principal towered over both of us. The room was dark, only a bit of natural light filtering through the windows and silhouetting him. I had my lines ready.
I would say I wanted my parents there and then nothing else. "You're not in trouble, Brooklyn. I called you down here to apologize." I didn't hear anything else he said. My ears were ringing as I tried to grapple with my beating heart that was still on full alert, waiting to be punished. I heard the rest of the story from my mom later. The librarian had been accusing me of stealing books, and I had been crying every night about it, unable to handle my beloved librarian calling me a bad person. When my mom found out, she was livid. Many angry emails were sent, which resulted in the principal apologizing to me. I was only a little bit older when my mom told me another right I had. If you're ever in a situation that you need to get out of, no matter the context, you can blame me. Say whatever lie you need about me to get out of there. This one I did understand. She had told me after I was recounting the birthday party I had just returned from. I had wanted to leave, but was terrified to tell the parents for fear of seeming rude. This thing that my mom had just told me felt like freedom, like thousands of pounds lifted off of my chest. For the first time in my life, I felt the entirety of how much my mom watched over me. She had just condoned lying. Me being safe meant more to her than me being good. And then we fought. All throughout high school, we engaged in a petty war, both trying to make the other feel worse. Vitriol coated our every sentence to one another. She would scream, and I would say whatever it took to grate her more, to make her angrier. Then we would both go cry privately in our rooms, never letting the other see our show of weakness. In secret, she emailed all of my teachers, begging them to help me graduate. I never found out until much later. She hated me, and I hated her right back. I'd never been more excited to move out and go to college. Things would be better there. I was right. Things were better there for about 3 weeks. Then everything fell apart, and suddenly I was alone. Even if I had wanted to talk to my mom, I knew I couldn't. She wouldn't understand. She never did. So I continued my isolation, throwing myself into whoever gave me attention. It always ended with me dragging my half-drowned body back up the shore, then I'd be running right back in. I think that's why I went with him. I can say whatever polite explanation I invented to tell my friends without hurting their feelings, but it always rings hollow. I was just lonely. I was lonely, and I wanted to talk to my mom more than ever. She was the only person in the world who could make things better, and the one person in the world who seemed determined to misunderstand me. So when I went with him, it wasn't because I had anything to prove or because I hadn't watched enough Dateline growing up. I just didn't care what happened to me anymore. Until I did. Until suddenly I needed to be out and away from there more than I've ever needed to be. My mom told me a story once about a date she had gone on. He wouldn't drive her home until she kissed him. She told it to me with a tone too light to be genuine. I wonder how terrified she must have felt. I wonder if she had been given an escape hatch by her own mom. So I blamed her. She's going to be so pissed if I don't get home right now. She'll take my phone away, she'll stop paying for my tuition, the lie continued. I said whatever I had to say. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't the one who wanted to leave, she was making me. So he finally let me go. I've never told my mom that story. She doesn't know anything about what happened my freshman year. She doesn't know how many times she saved me. But she does know about my life now. She saved me from it all. My ex, my bad grades, even my terrible nutrition. Sometimes we still fight, but my mom has always been my advocate, even when I wasn't. She's my hero. And then the next one, this is a short poem. It's titled 9/7/1990. I missed your birthday. You missed mine. They let me buy guns and go to bars now. Can I keep my promise yet? This is supposed to be an apology. I'm sorry I didn't tell you happy birthday. My face is raw, stuck in my hands, trying to rub out every word you sent. It's all point blank, pressing right outside my skull. Maybe if I had unblocked you sooner, your birthday text would have come through. Time zones are confusing. The wine you owe me tastes bad. Hurts just like my vodka shots, except only one is pretending. Don't want to call you unarmed on a Thursday night. You're probably sleeping. It's always your back, 8 hours ahead. Did you remember? Heavy fingers pressing delete before send? Don't answer. Just explain again how wine is supposed to taste. Never fit your jacket good. Ratty and torn and oversized, aging under a pile of clothes. Smells like rotten dust now. I checked. You don't know where my new apartment is. Packed everything up in one sleep sober night. told you that I became a cynic while breathing through peppered sleeves until I caught up to your mourning. There was something you were going to tell me when I got older, in case you forgot. Happy late birthday. Don't tell me what you wished for, or it won't come true.
Okay, we have two more readers. If you do want to sign up, I have the list. Just come grab me. They are Pam and then Tim.
This is a true story that I wrote about my mom, and I've called it Facing Life's Fears. People looked at her differently after hearing she'd survived being hit by lightning. It was a combination of feelings: awe, respect, reverence, and confusion. I was almost 8 when I first heard her tell this story at our new church. She had captured everyone's attention, and no one had ever told a story like this. My mom, Sandy Smith, was 13 years old in 1951 when her young women's group at church planned a camping trip to Darby Campground. The young men had their camp, and now the girls had Darby Campground. Their church had just purchased the acres of rugged land that year, and so there were no cabins or buildings. It straddled the borders of Idaho and Wyoming in the Targhee National Forest. It was the first year they'd used this campground, but after the lightning hit, many wondered if they should sell the land or keep it. Girls had died there, and who would want to camp there ever again after that tragedy? Sandy, like many of the young girls, had babysat and done small jobs to earn money for camp. Her Aunt Shirley lived close enough for her to help tend Shirley's twins. After paying her a little bit, Shirley handed Sandy a paper wrapped in brown craft wrap. When she opened the box, it was a new pair of jeans and a new shirt. Not the normal hand-me-down she usually got. Sandy hugged and thanked her aunt and promised to have a great time at camp. Being away from home just got that much better. She wore the jeans that first day at camp. Sandy and her friends Sandy Hancock and Gwen Albright met at their church with their sleeping bags. They all lived nearby and walked to school, church, and social functions together. Sandy Smith and Sandy Hancock hung out a lot, and their parents called them the two Sandys. About 50 girls and 6 leaders packed into vehicles for the 2-hour drive from Idaho Falls to Darby. One leader, Fred Miller, was a regional Boy Scout leader, and he had outdoor camping skills along with the first aid that scouts learn. Mr. Miller was extremely knowledgeable about this area and terrain. It's because of him and one other leader who just happened to be a nurse that only 5 deaths occurred that day and not 30 or 40. Darby was beautiful and serene except for the laughter of all those teenage girls setting up tents. They called places like Darby God's country, and the feeling was to be out in nature and to enjoy and appreciate it, but to recognize that God had created it, and He had created you, so have respect for nature. For many in this group, it was their first time away from home, and that was its own serenity. They admired the spacious sky, the tall trees, new flowers that Mr. Miller knew all the names of. What's not to enjoy when you're hiking through trails leading to alpine meadows and fresh, cool streams? Even the air you breathed was scented from the high mountain wilderness. Day 2 was August 1st, the day of the hike. The girls woke up excited. Mr. Miller led the way up the trail and through the caves with about 45 of the girls. He made sure everyone kept up and made the 1.5-mile hike interesting by pointing out plants and flowers along the way. In August, there were blossoms of tiger lily, yampa, waxbane berries, dogtooth violet, and several wild berries. It was a perfect summer day for a hike, but in the mountains, the weather can change fast and drastically, and it did. The rain started slowly, then it started to hail, and then heavy rain. Thunder and lightning hit the rim above them. The group was in a clearing, ready to have their lunch. The clearing was in the middle of tall trees, and one leader sat down leaning her back against one of the trees. Mr. Miller was leading the last of the girls out of the cave, and he shouted to Mrs. Holst to move, and move now. He stated that being under a tall tree wasn't a safe place to be. Mrs. Holst said this tree must have been here for hundreds of years, and lots of storms, and she didn't move. It was a huge 22-inch diameter balsam fir. Suddenly, crack and boom, lightning struck the tree, killing Mrs. Horst instantly. Then another strike, just as loud and just as close. One of the branches of the fir had been sheared almost all the way through. Girls were screaming, some of them thrown into the air, landing yards away. Several were thrashing on the ground, suffering from burns to their body, their hair on fire. Fred Miller and Nurse Richmond had also been hit and thrown about 30 feet, but without any regard for their own burns and injuries, they swung into medical mode. They performed first aid on the unconscious girls, and when a girl was revived, they'd teach her the technique to work on other girls. Some girls would slip back into unconsciousness and would have to be revived again. They were given hard candy, probably lifesavers, to help them stay conscious. The two Sandys had been hit as they sat cross-legged on the ground, about 20 feet from the tree. Many people don't realize that lightning can travel through the ground as well as through the air. Sandy Smith had been hit on her leg, right through those new jeans. She'd bear a scar there for the rest of her life. The internal damage and side effects weren't known for decades and can include restless leg syndrome, immune system damage, ADH, memory loss, fatigue, depression, sleep disorders, and weakened heart or lungs. The sensations Sandy felt on this day would remain with her, and if you asked her about it, she remembered it like it was yesterday. Years and decades didn't change the feeling of coming that close to death. The sights of fire and smoke coming from the girl's hair, the rain drenching everything, lunch sacks smoldering, all of them screaming, crying, praying. The intense noise of the two separate strikes coming just seconds apart and the tree limb trying to break free. Fred Miller yelling instructions for the girls to help each other apply the artificial respiration technique on the badly injured girls. The atrocious smell in the air of hair and skin burning, a smell like no other. Electricity in the metal from the impact, sparking the mass confusion among the group. Fear, panic, a sense of dread and hopelessness. Being dazed after the hit and living through it, but not knowing what was next. More lightning? Having to leave a sister or friend behind? Being able to find their way back down? There were so many feelings and sensations bombarding their young minds all at once. Sandy could not begin to describe how loud the lightning was, as it was louder than all things loud combined. There was a power that came from it, combined with the force of the sound. Either one would strike fear, but together they put one for a loss of mere words and made the hair on your arms stand up. Both Sandys had been hit, but Gwen had been knocked unconscious. Her two friends kneeled beside her after she came to and tried to help. Gwen lay numb on the grass, staring off into space, oblivious to the fact that she had a blade of grass across one eye. Sandy Smith was crying and trembling as she tried to remove it. Sandy Hancock tried too, but they were shaking too much and couldn't do it. Gwen continued to stare without blinking. It was surreal, but very much real. The branch that was sheared almost all the way through wouldn't fall for a couple of days. Had it fallen after the lightning strikes, it could have easily killed and crushed as many as 20 girls. Mr. Miller's efforts to move them from the trees saved their life from this. Mr. Miller could see they were in a bad way and Mother Nature wasn't helping. He asked for some volunteers who were all right to walk to make the hike back down to the base camp and alert the leaders there. Send someone to the nearest town for help. The two Sandys were part of the 5 girls who volunteered. The rain was still intense as these 5 girls struggled to move down the mountain, trying to remain on the muddy path. One girl suggested they stop and pray, so they did. They prayed for guidance down the mountain and to be safe and not panic or be hit again. They prayed for the physical strength to get help for the rest of their group. and the internal strength that they didn't yet feel. As they continued to slip down the path, the rain lightened and then stopped. When those still in the camp saw these 5 girls coming down alone, they rushed to meet them and hear of the tragedy. Leaders drove to Driggs, Idaho, and asked for help from local ranchers and farmers. Mr. Miller and Nurse Richmond saved all but 5 girls and Mrs. Holst before they started back down the mountain with the group of girls. They had tried to revive all of them numerous times, but knew by the burns and wounds that they were beyond help. Everyone packed into school buses and drove to Driggs to wait for their families. It was 1951, and the radio carried the news to Idaho Falls. They reported the tragedy and the deaths, but didn't mention any names. Families would meet their girls at the church in Driggs. None of the families knew if their daughter would be among the survivors, or if she'd be one carried out on horseback. In 1951, that was the option to bring these bodies back down. As the group was leaving in the buses, one lone girl came walking down the path. Her sister was still crying as they'd left her for dead after multiple attempts to revive her. Her clothes were burned, her hair was singed, but she was walking towards them, alive. She alone had come to consciousness in the meadow, and when she saw she was surrounded by dead bodies, at first she thought she herself had died, and maybe she was in heaven. But then she immediately realized that she was alive and needed to get out of there fast. As everyone was loading into the school buses, the camp was left in a shambles. Someone would come later and get the tents and personal items, but right now they needed medical attention and to notify the families. Sandy Hancock's parents told Mrs. Smith that they'd drive up and bring both Sandys home. The families met at the church in Driggs to see if their daughters were okay. Somehow the women in Driggs had put together a lunch of hot soup and sandwiches for these girls as they waited and tried to warm up. All their parents were in a state of shock, not knowing if their daughters were alive. Mr. and Mrs. Hancock cried tears of joy when they saw their Sandys in the church. They sped back to Idaho Falls and met the Smith family at their home. Aunt Shirley and her sisters came over to greet and hug her. "I never would have forgiven myself for helping you earn money to go to camp," cried Shirley. "Thank goodness you're okay." Her injuries were minor compared to most, and either her parents didn't think she needed medical attention or they couldn't afford it. That night at home, a cousin had come to stay over, and Sandy had to sleep on the couch. During the night, it started to storm. Sandy was shaking and crying as the thunder and lightning kept her awake. Her mom came in and lay beside her and tried to comfort her. She laid in bed the next day, but afterwards her life was back to normal. Part of her life was back to normal. The other part she tried to ignore. That part in the back of her mind that wondered, why had they been hit? And why had she been spared? Would she ever heal completely? Could she trust going camping or being in the outdoors in the mountains again? I'll leave it there and read the rest next time. Thank you.
Joseph, would you turn this off? Yep.
All right, that concludes our event this evening, everyone. If you wouldn't mind putting 1 or so chairs back, that would be super helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Willie.